Welcome to our third lecture that talks about the currents in pacemaker cells. This lecture is going to focus on how we slow down or speed up pacemaker cells. As a quick review, we have some pacemaker cells here that are displaying their typical electrophysiology. Recall that we have a calcium current which causes the cell to become positive. That current inactivates, and then potassium leaves the cell, causing the cell to become negative. And then finally, at the very bottom of this, we have the IF current, which is that odd current that turns on when the cell becomes too negative and allows sodium to enter the cell, slowly causing the cell to depolarize and reach our first threshold, and then we can continue that again. The key to understanding what's going on in these cells is that these currents can be altered by neurotransmitters and other substances. So the channels that underlie these currents are susceptible to alteration by a variety of neurotransmitters and hormones. So for example, if we want to speed up the pacemakers, we can add norepinephrine or in some cases epinephrine. If we want to slow down the pacemakers, we can add acetylcholine. Another substance that speeds up the heart rate is thyroid hormone. So let's take a look at how some of this might happen. So there's basically three ways we can do this. First, we can alter the efficiency, the size of the current of the IF to channels that underlie the IF current. So imagine we have a pacemaker. We've caused the cell to depolarize and repolarize, and we're approaching the point at which the IF current will start flowing. And so I'm going to draw just a normal IF current, like so. And this current is some flow of sodium into the cell, causing the cell to slowly become more positive. Now we can imagine cases in which we increase the size of that current. In other words, the channels are more active, or there are more of these channels that have activated. We have a pool of channels and we've allowed a higher percentage of them to become active. And in that case, we are going to more quickly allow sodium into the cell, and we reach our second threshold sooner than we would previously. And so I'm using green to indicate a speed up. And of course, then we would trigger the opening of the calcium channel. We can also make it so that the IF current is smaller, right? And that is that the channels are less efficient at letting sodium into the cell. Or in other cases, we might imagine that we have a lower percentage of channels that actually activate when we reach threshold. So here, because sodium is entering the cell more slowly, it takes longer for the cell to become positive. And so now we've slowed down our pacemaker, right? And so again, remember that the SA node typically is going to beat at 100 beats per minute on its own, but we're always slowing it down so we get to some resting heart rate that's considerably less, right? Because we are adding acetylcholine onto the cell all the time. So that's the first thing that we can imagine. So let's take a look at something else that can happen. So I'm going to erase the stuff of the IF, and we'll talk about another possibility. So we'll redraw our sort of normal stuff, like so. And so the second possibility has to do with the fact that these thresholds that I've drawn are really malleable. They can move up and down. And so again, this reflects what the channels themselves are doing. So let's start off by assuming that we can move the threshold of the calcium current downwards, and we can do that, right? So we're going to keep our IF the same, but now look, we are going to hit threshold sooner than we did previously, and that would allow the calcium channel to open, and then we would essentially speed up the heart rate. So we've sped up the heart rate just by lowering the threshold for the calcium channel. Now let's go back to our baseline, and this time I'm going to raise the threshold of our calcium channel. And so it is going to take longer for my slow IF current to reach this new higher threshold and fire the action potential, start the calcium current coming in that underlies our action potential. So notice that by doing that, we have increased the heart rate by lowering the threshold for the calcium channel, or decrease the heart rate by increasing that threshold, making it harder to get to the threshold, longer time to get to the threshold. And so finally, the last thing we want to talk about is the threshold for the IF current can also be altered. So I'm going to erase some stuff here, right? And again, we're going to go back to our normal threshold, like so. But this time, I'm going to lower that threshold. So the cell has to become more negative than previously in order for us to reach the threshold for the IF current. And so it takes a longer period of time for us to get to that point, and of course that means the heart rate will slow down. I've over dramatized that a little bit. And then we go back to sort of a normal situation. We're going to start approaching threshold, but this time I'm going to increase the threshold, make the threshold of the IF current occur at a higher voltage. So we're going to move up to here. And if we do that, we reach that threshold sooner than we did previously, and the IF current opens up more quickly, and we get the action potential more quickly. So again, by lowering the threshold of the IF current, it takes us longer to reach that threshold, meaning that the cell has to let in more sodium, taking a longer period of time to get back to our first threshold. By increasing the threshold of the IF current, we can reach that threshold more quickly, and we can let sodium start dribbling into the cell sooner, so our pacemaker goes up. So which sort of these things happens in the cell? Well, depending on the neurotransmitter, multiple things can happen. We can, in fact, change the dynamics of the IF current and lower its threshold and lower the threshold of calcium all at the same time. And so what this does is, depending on the situation, we have the ability to dramatically increase or dramatically decrease the speed of the pacemaker cells, because we can affect those speeds in several different ways. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a fun time exploring the dynamics of the pacemaker cells.